and allowed. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that Josh Downs on Jack Gibbons on a crossing route is
tough day.
Tough situation. It's a bad look. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined as always by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, it's an odd week, so the Titans lose in embarrassing fashion. It seems it's death, taxes, the sun rising in the east, setting in the west, and the Titans losing on an odd week are the certainties in life. What do we think?
I will say the one certainty that is not in life is that I finally
uncertainty.
Is
that a fun way of saying uncertainty in life?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
The one way is that Zach Lyons can no longer bully me because of my height on my chair here, because I figured it out. You know, I've got the high chair height, and now I've got the low mic, and I figured it out because my mic stand is actually broken. So now I can no longer bring it up. So now I have to force my chair up.
You have to be up. I see.
To have the mic down. So now I figured that out. So spirits, just like the Titans should be, are still high, but my mic is low. Like many Titans fans today.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
All right.
Yeah, I like it. We're talking Titans today, obviously, and they put up a stinker in Indianapolis. A lot to discuss in terms of what went wrong. Was not wonderful, was not amazing. What is wonderful and amazing is our phenomenal sponsor, BoomBozz Craft Pizza and Taphouse, which I want to talk to you a little bit about before we get started today. They have 3 Middle Tennessee locations. BoomBozz Pizza does here in the Middle Tennessee area. In Spring Hill is where JT and I do our shows live every Thursday night before Thursday Night Football this season. And they also have locations in East Nashville, if you're from in town, or in Murfreesboro, if you're out that way. They also are in Kentucky or in Indiana, if you're from out of the state. And they make delicious, fantastic pizza, craft pizzas that have been award-winning for a couple of years in a row now, 4 times at the Las Vegas International Pizza Expo, and the only company in America to be able to say that they have won Best New Pizza in America twice. That belongs to BoomBozz Pizza. We love BoomBozz. We love their food. Unironically, can't wait every week when we get to go do our show live from there to get some free pizza on the fantastic manager down there at BoomBozz. And I mean, listen, I cannot speak highly enough of it. It's delicious. The selection on tap that they have is delicious. Check them out. BoomBozz Pizza. Anywhere you are here in the Middle Tennessee area, you are an earshot from BoomBozz Pizza. So check them out. If you are watching with us live on Twitter or on Facebook, appreciate you being here with us on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. But I would love for you to get off of that. Head on over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. That's Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. You'll find this live stream there. And that's where you can become a part of the conversation in the comments like our buddy Logan Grady already is. We want to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions, your rage on the Titans today in the comments, and would love to have a conversation, not just about what went wrong today, but what about, what you think about this team going forward into one more game in London next week before their bye, and kind of a first third of the season checkpoint for a team that is up and down is the best way to put them. And we're going to talk about one of those down days today. So make sure you're subscribed over at Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, and be a friend, tell a friend, help us get some eyeballs on this live stream. Send this link or hit the retweet or like button, whatever you can do to help get some other folks in here to be a part of the conversation. Would be considered a personal favor. So thank you very much. All right. Titans go down to the Colts 23-16, a loss in which they have themselves to blame as much as in any other loss this year. I certainly think that the Colts played a good game, and there's a lot of credit that is due to them. But the Titans, pretty uncharacteristic in a couple of elements of the game. Another road performance where they were completely heartless defensively. This makes 2 in a row for them. In Cleveland, obviously allowing 43 points, then allowing Gardner Minshew for the most part today, a backup quarterback, a good one to be sure, but a backup nonetheless, to put up 23 points on them. And more important than the points, allowed the Colts pretty much anything they wanted in the passing game, both short, intermediate, and deep. as well as most dramatically in the run game. The stout Titans run defense that we've talked about all year long and for over a year at this point did not show up today. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But let's start from the top. In general, the 10,000-foot view of this game is that the Titans didn't deserve to win this game at all. Again, the Colts deserve their due. They won the game. Good for them. I think there's a lot of promising things going on with the Colts. As we talked about last week in preparation for this game, the Colts are a better team at this point in the season than I think a lot of Titans fans were expecting them to be coming into the year. That aside, the Titans didn't deserve to win. And I think that you could easily argue that if they had played their style of football, if they hadn't made some key mistakes or been lackadaisical or been non-existent in certain elements of the game, they could have and would have won this game. But their horrible defensive showing, I would say the worst in a long time, but frankly, it's the worst since 2 weeks ago when they were in Cleveland. Two really pathetic defensive showings for a group that's supposed to be the strength of this team. More on that in a minute. Along with horrible red zone efficiency on the offensive side of the ball. So that's no good. And then on top of all of that, they're punked in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Totally punked. So those are the three shortcomings we're going to focus in on today, because I think that those are the three shortcomings that cost them this game. But in general, this roller coaster that is flying up the hill and back down the other side each and every week, it's over and over and over. And we've reached the point where everyone is officially no longer having a good time. You can't do this. Let us off the ride, right? That's what I think every Titans fan is saying today. I'd imagine that's what a lot of Titans players are feeling today. And I'm sure the coaches are pulling their hair out on the flight back from Indianapolis right now, trying to figure out a way to get off of this damn ride. And so far through 5 weeks, they can't. It makes you question going into next week. JT, not to get ahead of ourselves, and we have plenty of time this week to talk about the Titans and Ravens in London, which we'll be attending, by the way. A win in that game, hypothetically, does what? Does that convince anybody of anything? Does it ring as it's an even week, so the Titans won. They'll go into their bye, and then they'll have a stinker when they come back out of it.
Yes, hello. I'm also here. Yes, I also have thoughts on this game as well.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. Tell me.
No, you're fine. I'm just joshing with you here. But no, does it really do anything for the Titans this week? I don't think so. Because even if the Titans do have a bounce back performance, that's now 2 weeks where we would probably see a standout offensive performance and defensive performance, and then also see 2 or 3 weeks where the Titans just don't do enough to win the game. And I don't think that with that sample size right now, we can really say what this team is. And we kind of talked about this going in right now. So like with this game under our belts now, on Thursday, we talked about these next two games are going to be very important for the Titans because they did get after a statuesque version of Joe Burrow, who looked very considerably better today against the Arizona Cardinals. And now they're going up against Anthony Richardson, which we'll get into. He did not play the whole game. And now they're going up against Lamar Jackson, who against a tough Steelers front seven today looked pretty just like mediocre. He looked all right. Good. Yeah. I thought he looked okay. I didn't see premier Lamar Jackson. But that's kind of what you get against the Steelers.
Sure.
Case in point that we've now seen a game where it's kind of gotten out of hand for the Titans now through the run game. We saw that a little bit with the Bengals with Joe Mixon, and now we've seen a full game with Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, but honestly, mostly Zach Moss. We saw a game get out of hand with the run. So next week will be a big telling point, or just how we can view the Titans going forward.
That's my argument though. I don't think that it is. Honestly,
really?
I think that it's important for them to win. Don't get me wrong. And they have a lot to lose if they are to lose that game. They'd be at a point where they're 2-4. And we'll talk a lot about this week about what it means if they're 2-4, what it means if they're 3-3. But my argument is, yes, it's important to win. We've reached the point now where week 1, disappointing, ugly loss. Week 2, big time win in the bounce back spot. Week 3, the worst loss in a long time for this team. Week 4, one of the best wins, the best win for this team in a long time. Week 5, an embarrassing loss on the road to a divisional opponent that you're supposed to be better than. A week 6 win against the Ravens on the road in a bounce back spot is par for the course at this point. It's going to take, I think, for a lot of people, you need to win at the Ravens, regroup over this bye, make some significant personnel changes or think long and hard about them, which we're going to talk more about in a second. And then come out of that bye and you get, off the top of my head, Atlanta, Pittsburgh.
Steelers.
Yeah, I think those are the two of the next couple games for them. You got to come out and look good in those games and not have a dip and then a rise and a dip. And then you got to find some consistency. Mike Vrabel said after the game that his message all week to this team was that the Titans needed to go out there and validate what they did last week. That's what he said. Validate your win. Get off the ride. And they didn't. They didn't. That cannot feel great in that locker room, right? For that to have been the message, validate this win. And then you go out there and that's the performance you put up, which is the complete opposite of validation. It is validating that you're an unserious team right now. So as long as the Titans stay in this week-to-week roller coaster, wildly swinging high and low, right? Every week is a mystery box for the Titans, and it's never like the week before. It's always different. You can't have any continuity. You can't have any semblance of momentum with this team. You can't go through the year like that. And you're going to be an unserious team as long as you maintain this ridiculous swinging of the pendulum. And if you want to have any postseason hopes, you can't operate this way week in and week out, or you're going to be a 500 team. You're not going to be any good. You're going to be stuck in purgatory where no team wants to be, and where this team certainly should be wiser and is absolutely equipped to avoid, right? They are set up as a roster to, break glass in case of emergency. They got a lot of players they're looking to for the future, that they can get out there and get some playing time later in the year if things are starting to go south, if they realize they're not going to be able to compete in the playoffs. And they can get those guys some reps and get them some run and see what they have in them and get some important intel on those players. And so again, we're not to that point. It's week 5. Like they still have a chance to get to the bye at 500, which that's kind of the perspective I have today for folks that are upset, and rightfully so. The perspective is what we were talking about on Thursday, JT, which you brought up a little bit. We came into this first 6-week stretch for the team, and the idea, I think, for most people was if they can get out of it 500, they are in good shape. They're ready to rock and roll down the stretch. They've got some red meat games, and they can, try to find some momentum, find some continuity there, stack some wins, put a couple, in by couple, I mean literally 2 good games in a row together, and see if they can heat up at the right time for the playoffs. So if they get to that point, maybe it's you and I somewhere in London, a week from today on Sunday afternoon, talking about this team after a big win, and it's they're at 3-3 by the bye, which is what we were kind of thinking they needed to be. And so what do they look to change in the bye? We could also be at 2-4, and I think a number of people, I think there's going to be a lot of revisionist history on this, and naturally so. But there were a number of people, JT, and back me up on this, because I think you've seen this as well, that before this season started, it was like you have to at least be 2-4. If you can be 2-4 by the bye, you're not dead yet. I think you're going to see a lot of people that said you can be 2-4 by the bye and you're all right. A month ago, a week from today, if the Titans happen to lose against the Ravens, talk about how you're 2-4, you're dead. It's going to flip like that, and I'm gonna push back on those people, because that's not what you said a month ago, and I don't think it's the case that you're dead at 2-4, but it certainly is am I crazy to think it seems like there's a big difference between 3-3 and 2-4 when you head into your week 7 bye?
No, but I think that once again, the narrative is going to be that this team can go against a quarterback who collapses under pressure, and that if you have a team that is able to withstand the pressure, that might be a problem. Like if Lamar Jackson is able to slice and dice this team next week, then you have a problem. But if they are able to contain him, like they did with Anthony Richardson today before he got hurt, and then also kind of contain the run, then I think this team is still on track. Okay.
I'm not even disagreeing with you there. I think that's a perfectly reasonable argument. I really do. And I'd imagine you probably agree. Ultimately, in terms of the way that the fans see this team, we have reached a point where they've got to do it more than 1 week in a row for fans to buy in.
That's also fair. But like right now, we also have said this every single week, that it is the hardest part of the schedule. Like they are playing very, very hard teams. So I feel like you give them 2 weeks against the Falcons, who didn't look very impressive today in their win over the Texans, or the Steelers, who get a gutsy win over the Ravens, but that's always a team that they play differently than they've played any other team.
It's a voodoo game. It's a black hole game, right?
It's a very
Singularity.
different argument that we're saying right after the bye, you know?
Yep. No, I agree. Do me a favor, JT, if we got any comments, because I do want to pay attention to the comment section here as I'm going. Please interrupt and help us.
Yeah, we
can anything we need to talk about before we talk about the defense.
Logan had a couple of them already today, just with some thoughts here. He says Titans played better when Richardson was on the field, since he breaks contained quickly. The erratic throws hid the secondary issues. Maybe I do think Gardner was a little bit controlled.
It's kind of.
Now that's something I did ask you about. I was asking you when we were watching this game, what if Anthony Richardson stayed in that entire game? Would it really have mattered?
Nope.
Or would the big time plays that Anthony Richardson make kind of counteract the mistakes he made early in the game, versus having Gardner Minshew, who's kind of just like a controlled element in that game? I feel like,
right.
He's kind of the control there. So
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the difference. I think that those quarterbacks, like in general, there's not a big difference between them right now. Obviously, Richardson has a wildly different ceiling than Gardner Minshew has, but if Minshew's floor and ceiling are here and Richardson's floor and ceiling are here, it's all evening out to basically the same quarterback. So yeah, if you had Richardson in the full game, I think that you probably would have had a couple more explosive plays for the Colts, probably a couple extra mistakes on the Colts' part. With Minshew, not as much explosion, consistent, reliable. Ultimately, it didn't really if your question is if Richardson comes in for that second half, is it a different ball game? No, I think Anthony Richardson would have just been handing the ball off to Zach Moss, just like Gardner Minshew did for Moss to run over your team over and over and over, because that was really the difference in this game.
And to that point, Paul Baki also chimes in here saying, to that point, really boiled down to failed run game D, which was unusual and couldn't stop third down, which I think we'll probably get into. And then also Logan chimes in again that says this team has no identity. They don't impose the run. Front seven is inconsistent on pressure. What happened to Arden Key today? Is it Henry or is it the line? Chig can't catch. Secondary is a disaster. A lot of questions in
this
there.
You see this right here? This is Logan spiraling. This is him spiraling on this team. I mean, I think that there is some validity to his general point that this team does feel like week to week right now. They don't have a super firm identity. I actually see that as a positive because of the way that I view, and I talk to you about this all the time. I talk about it on the show. September and October football, completely different from November, December, January football to me, and the importance of what you're doing. If you're a team that doesn't seem to have a super firm identity in September and October, I have no problem with that as long as it is in the form of you're trying different things. You're trying to see what you want to make your identity. You're window shopping with what different ways you can, fundamental tenets of your team, the way you want to operate. Obviously, this team has a couple of those already in place, generally speaking, right? Today was kind of an outlier day across the board, but generally this team is very staunch against the run and on the defensive side of the ball. On offense, they're an efficient play-action football team, take shots down the field. Ryan Tannehill, not afraid to push the ball downfield with his arm, get some explosive chunk plays, has a couple of players that are big yak guys, and then in the run game, they implement a number of different run schemes with two very different explosive running backs that it's kind of the meat and potatoes. That's the protein that drives the meal for their offense. That wasn't the case today, obviously, but that's generally what this team has been in the past. And it feels like to me that Tim Kelly and Mike Vrabel and Shane Bowen, to a lesser extent, in my opinion, are kind of playing around with what they want their identity to be for this team as they change a little bit. And that's been a theme for this team coming into the year. Like the first 5 weeks of the year is they're kind of toying with some different things. You're seeing them do some different things, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It's been very up and down as to whether those new things are working or not. And so I don't mind them trying different things, but we are nearing the point in the year. I mean, by the time they get back from their bye, where it's 8 weeks in to the season, it's November. It's time to, you got to put up or shut up. It's time to figure it out. And you could argue that they're no closer today to figuring out than they were in week one. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but they don't see, at least they haven't shown consistently that they've made much progress on that front. It's been very up and down. Time will tell on that. And their lack of identity right now isn't super concerning to me. But if they continue to lack identity and don't start to put those puzzle pieces together quickly in the next couple of games, then I think it's fair to get concerned. Let's talk about the defense, JT, unless you have anything else we need to discuss in the comments.
No, I think everything you just said kind of covers the bases.
Perfect. So defensively, and this is something that I said on social media, I'm going to defend it now because some people push back. This game's on the defense. And you certainly can point to the offense and say a number of different things. They did not pull their weight on the scoreboard. They did not pull their weight with keeping the defense off the field, giving them a breather at times. They simply weren't effective enough. All of that we'll address in a moment, I promise. But at the end of the day, this football team is built to win with their defense. It's how they were put together by the front office preseason. It's the way that their coaching staff operates in season. It's the way that they play ball. It's how it's supposed to work for this defense to be the cornerstone that the rest of this team is built around and succeeds upon. And that wasn't the case today at all. This defense was really piss poor. There wasn't a single player that you can point to and say they had a good day. They were a plus player on more occasions than they were a negative player. Everybody looked bad. You were missing some key guys, Tier Tart in the run game, which those of you in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how much you felt Tier Tart's absence impacted the Titans' run defense. I certainly felt like he may have made himself some more money this offseason when his contract is up with this game, even though he did not show up and did not play, because it felt like you had a massive man, Tier Tart-sized hole in the middle of the Titans' run defensive front. And they were exploiting that. The Colts were. Zach Moss had a fantastic day, 195 yards, I believe, in the run game or from scrimmage. I can't remember if that was total or either way. Zach Moss, nearly 200 yards
from scrimmage
today. From scrimmage. Okay, so a lot of yards to a running back that is something we've not seen this Titans team allow in the last 17 or 18 consecutive games. Today was a big deal, and Tier Tart was not there, and maybe those two things aren't entirely correlated. I'm sure it's not all Tier Tart, but him not being there is clearly an issue for them. Your nose tackle, your big run-stuffing nose tackle who specializes in being athletic enough to make plays, but is primarily a run stuffer, is a body in the way. It's a big deal for him not to be there. So I do think this game would have been a little bit different if he'd been healthy, but those are the breaks. You got to have depth. You got to have guys that can step up. The Titans did not have that today, and the rest of the front did not pick up the slack. Generally on defense, I mean, the secondary, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse talking about them every week. They are inexcusably bad right now. And it's hard for me to, it's not hard for me to, actually, I do it all the time. It annoys me to have to talk about the secondary as a whole and about how poor they've been, because there are certain players that on the whole this season, I've liked and felt they've played good ball, all things told. Sean Murphy-Bunting, I feel like, is playing good ball for this team.
I agree.
He's not perfect by any means. Mm-hmm. He's making some mistakes here and there, but in general, he is making positive contributions to this team in the secondary.
Yep.
Second-year player, Roger McCreary, having, I think, a good year and a consistent year. And there's a fly in my face. And he's somebody that I don't love putting down as a member of the secondary as a whole. It doesn't matter, because you've got guys like Christian Fulton and Trey Avery and Christian Fulton and Elijah Molden and at times Kevin Byard and Christian Fulton, all not pulling their
three
weight.
Times.
Oh, trust me, we're gonna get to Christian Fulton in particular here in a second. He's the guy I'm wanting to focus on, and I'm sure is going to be focused on all week long, because you can tell we have reached the cliff on Christian Fulton, dialogue on Christian Fulton, vibes amongst the fan base, amongst his teammates, amongst his coaches, amongst everybody. We are on the precipice of full-blown Christian Fulton falling Armageddon. Yeah, DEFCON 1 Christian Fulton season. We're not there yet, but we are, I think, one more performance like today away. And but before we get to him, again, in general, the defense secondary has been poor despite a couple of guys playing better. I think that the safety play in particular is the most disappointing for me, besides Fulton, which is an outlier right now. By far the most disappointing. Besides him, Kevin Byard and Elijah Molden and Amani Hooker are supposed to be a good, solid, reliable group back there, especially Hooker and Byard. And they've not been horrible this season by any means, but they've not been fantastic. By the way, the middle linebackers, I'm kind of bearing the lead here. The middle linebackers had a horrendous day today. It was a heat check game for guys like Azeez Al-Shaair and like Jack Gibbons, and Jack Gibbons in particular. A really ugly performance for him today. Could not hang with Josh Downs a couple of times and allowed. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that Josh Downs on Jack Gibbons on a crossing route is
tough day.
Tough situation. It's a bad look, and the Colts exploited that. And that's just, I mean, like, I think that there's just a physical limitation there that you've got to figure out. That's a assignment and scheme issue, in my opinion, because the Jack Gibbons it's just not going to work for you on a consistent basis. Azeez, again, didn't have a great day himself. And up front, they weren't affecting the quarterback as much as they should have, especially when you get Gardner Minshew in there. This Colts offensive line with a number of holes, like, they needed to do better than they did. But the secondary is clearly the issue above all issues with this team. On defense, every drop, I had one person who's a Titans fan text me during the game, every drop back is a nightmare, which is a fun way of putting, like, you're terrified of what's going to happen every time a team drops back to pass against this Titans defense. The second that they load up, they cock their arm back, take a couple of jump steps, you can tell they're loading up to go deep. You clench up and you hold your breath because you have a feeling this is either going to be a deep completion to a wide open player that's found a very soft spot in the zone, or it's going to be a PI call against a defender that had to cheat in order to not get burned. That was kind of the case most of the day. They are allowing simply too many explosive plays. So the secondary, I don't know. I mean, you've got to make some personnel changes. One in particular that we can talk about now, and that's Christian Fulton. Look,
let's get into it.
I got a number of people in my mentions on Twitter towards the end of this game asking when Caleb Farley was coming back. So if you needed a picture painted for you of how bad the Christian Fulton situation is, Caleb Farley, a man that has been deemed a bum by many in Titan circles, a man who has been left for dead in terms of expectations from the Titans faithful. They're now wondering when Lazarus Mike can come back from the dead, because the cornerback one on this team currently is playing such horrendous, terrible football. They're desperate to try anything else, and they are not wrong to want to do so. Christian Fulton's been horrible. I mean, let me pull up his numbers real quick, and I don't know if at this point they will have the numbers out yet. Okay, so never mind. We'll know later in the week just how much damage he did statistically in allowing a number of catches and runs after the catch and some poor tackling, but general this season, he's been a pretty good tackler. Today it was not the case. And so it was bad coverage skills on top of bad tackling, just overall a complete liability on the defensive side of the ball. But as much as you can blame him and should blame him, he is trying his best out there. His best clearly not even close to enough. At some point you have to blame the coaching staff, and it's inexcusable that Christian Fulton is still out there on the field every defensive snap at this point. This has to fall on Mike Vrabel. It has to fall on Shane Bowen. Has to fall on the guys that are responsible for who is out there playing for this Titans team. You have to sit him down. There are no two ways about it. The dude's lost it. He's lost it. He's borderline unplayable at all right now. And certainly when he's in a game like this where he's just a sieve defensively, you've got to sit him down. You got to get him out of there, and they wouldn't do it.
And that's something that, I mean, I know it was kind of a hot take at the beginning of the week, but like, I remember asking you, is it a possibility that the Titans bench Fulton this week? Like, is that something that they would consider? And you said, I think that's not something they're considering, but like another bad week, see where it goes from now. And I feel like everyone is now on that train. I think I was a week too early on that, but like
never wrong this early.
I just, man, it was a tough day for him. And we'll get into some of his comments today, but when you have a receiver like Alec Pierce just kind of bullying you all day on a lot of routes.
A guy who we've been bullying for not being very good so far.
Exactly. Like,
get right game for Alec Pierce.
It's tough. It's tough for him out there.
Now let's talk about what he said after the game. And this is the biggest thing that I want to get into. I have some quotes from him. I have some quotes from fellow teammates of his. Let's just do some comparing and contrasting and see where Christian Fulton is at here. Quote from Christian Fulton after the game in the locker room. It's hard when you got to play against the refs and the receivers. Quote, he, talking about Alec Pierce, pushed me over. I thought I was square. That's part of the game. For me personally, that's a bad call, but that's life as a DB, and it's what it is. Quote, I feel like I was very technically sound today when asked about his recent struggles from our buddy Teron Davenport. Besides one play, he said, the one with 11 where he caught the out route, that was on me, I guess. But for the most part, I think today was technically sound. You can't be making those excuses after that game. You can't be making those excuses after the season you've had so far. When you are supposed to be the shutdown outside corner for this team and you are getting turned into burnt toast on a consistent basis, week in and week out, a complete sieve and a liability defensively. What are you doing immediately after a terrible game in a bad loss that isn't explicitly on your shoulders, but you certainly did nothing to help this team? What are you doing saying this to reporters? Even if you're thinking it, you have to know better than to make these kinds of excuses. Now, Mike Vrabel, for his part, he told, like we said, we got to see him sit this guy down eventually. Like, it's on the coaches at some point. And to Vrabel's credit, I suppose he was asked after the game about whether they considered it. He did say that the coaching staff talked about Fulton potentially sitting down at halftime. They were apparently Vrabel was coaching him up on double moves at halftime, and then he fell for a double move, and like immediately after the halftime ended and the Colts got the ball back. Some quotes from Vrabel on Fulton. We got to make sure to keep our eyes on our man and not in the backfield, he said. We're not going to intercept the ball in man coverage. Our job in man coverage is to not let the guy we're covering catch the ball. We can't go looking for interceptions in man coverage, which is kind of a subtweet at Christian Fulton. He thinks maybe he was going for some interceptions. I don't know what we're doing, coaching a guy up at halftime on double moves. Like, that feels like a pretty elementary thing. If he's not getting it, he's not getting it. He's been in the league for a little bit. I don't think you're making that adjustment on the fly. I'm not a coach, maybe, whatever. That seems like kind of a lost cause and an out to be able to say, well, we did talk to him about it at halftime. We didn't set him down, but we talked. What is the talking doing? He's broken right now, whether it's mentally or physically or whatever it is. The guy is broken. Now, to compare him to some of his teammates, Christian Fulton making excuses about the referees and having to go against the players and the referees, God forbid. Some other leaders on this Titans defense. Kevin Byard talking after the game about how they just did not do enough to limit the explosive plays. They have to do better limiting explosive plays. Jeffrey Simmons puts his hand up in front of the media and says, I was not good enough. A guy that got hurt in the game, came back in the next series and continued to play anyways, even though he did not put up a very good performance by his standards. Immediate hand up. I did not do enough. Arden Key, new leader for this Titans defense, said, we got our ass whooped. That was his message to the media. We got our ass whooped. Can't do it. Can't have it. Got to be better. Christian Fulton goes on and on about how he feels he was very, very fundamentally sound in this game. Besides just one bad play, it's going to happen. Other than that, very fundamentally sound. And boy, is it hard as a DB to go up against the referees and the players. Like, that makes it really difficult.
The tape's going to be fun to watch tomorrow.
Oh, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to
be I'm sure he's going to have a blast in tape study. I'm sure that he's going to not want to go online all week long because he's going to get raked over the coals as he deserves to. There's one bright spot with the Christian Fulton situation, JT, just one. And that is his father on social media who has been on one. On Twitter in the mentions of, I know that he's been in my mentions. I talked to Sam Phelan about it last week. He's been in his mentions, Teron Davenport's mentions. I've seen him in Paul Kaharski's mentions. I've seen him in Mike Herndon's mentions. He is doing spiritual battle for his son, defending him online. He is going to work defending his son, which again, is your son. I understand, but it's in some very funny borderline I don't know, illiterate, maybe a little bit strong, unintelligible ways, very childish ways. Mike Herndon tweeted, leave, just amongst the couple of responses he had, Mike Herndon tweeted, leave Fulton in Indy a couple of minutes after the game. And Christian Fulton's dad, who is at KA4TON, by the way, on Twitter, if you want to go check out his replies, it's a fun time. He said, leave Christian Fulton in Indy with your mom. Got him with the your mom joke. Love that. Hilarious from a grown man defending his multimillionaire son. So yeah, I mean, I tweeted something about Fulton not needing to be on this team starting, and he replied to me today that it would be you will regret, I promise. He said, you will regret, I promise, which kind of sound his grammar is interesting. He kind of sounds like the Egyptian guy that emails you with something that's definitely not spam about the gold fortune that was left to him, and you're an inheritor. It sounds a little fishy, but it is in fact Christian Fulton's dad. We've confirmed this, so that's the bright spot on Christian Fulton. Apparently, according to Strike 113, his mother is going even crazier on Twitter, which I'm gonna have to go check out that later. But yeah, Christian Fulton. And do we have any thoughts from the peanut gallery on Christian Fulton we need to dive into, or can we talk a little about the offense?
Not a lot of thoughts on Christian Fulton. Just
anything in general we need to discuss.
Logan says, gotta give it to Fulton that he was at least honest, which is something that we've talked about.
Honest about being delusional is not good. That's not, if you're an honest, delusional person, which it's kind of delusional if you think that you're bad play. If you're Christian Fulton right now and you think you're playing really good besides one play and it's really the refs, I'm sorry, you're delusional. It's not what's happening.
And then one more thing on the defense before Logan adds here that is ask a question. Is Byard playing well? Didn't see him getting beat, but isn't getting better with the interceptions either. Your thoughts on that?
By his standards, he's not playing amazing right now. I would say, and from what I've had to see this tape for this week, but from the first 4 weeks of tape, kind of the general theme for me is he's playing well, he's playing sound, he's having to do some babysitting here and there, and that's naturally setting you up for some failure, putting him in some spots where he's having to do some more cornerback responsibility things than safety responsibility things. He's not able to be that, you talk about the interceptions, he's not really able to be that ball hawk, deep free safety who's just looking to make a play on the ball when he has other responsibilities in zone packages or covering for guys that, are the rest of the secondary in this team that's kind of struggling, guys like Christian Fulton or Trey Avery or anybody like that. So that's where I'm at with him. It's not, I'm not super concerned, but he needs to play better. He needs to play better.
I mean, I think he's playing sound ball. We're missing those key Kevin Byard plays that you see. Like he has not been that player that you look to in a game and say, Kevin Byard was all over this game. Like we've said, a couple other corners have been, like Sean Murphy-Button in the last game or the last two games. Just a lot of guys that have had big plays. Kevin Byard has been around, but he hasn't shown up,
Yep.
And I think that's how we feel about him, and we'll have to see going forward. But besides that, we can get into the offensive struggles.
Logan asked, do you think Fulton gets re-signed? I will say that is the other bright spot for Christian Fulton. He is making it incredibly easy for this Titans team to decide whether or not to retain him in a contract year. Discussion nobody will have to have next. I think no matter what at this point, I think it's a conversation we're gonna have to have. So that's nice.
And then we can get into the offensive struggles, but outside of that, we'll have to circle around because we do have a couple of questions or comments in here about some overreactive Titans fans about getting a little too ahead of themselves, I think personally.
Okay.
But we'll get to that. Okay.
You tab those. We'll circle around those to the end here. Let's talk about the offensive side of the ball. The offense, there are struggles there that are to blame for sure. It's not like the offense did enough to win this game. They only scored 16 points. They scored one touchdown. Now, you have to give props to two guys in particular offensively. Nick Folk, granddaddy strong legs, as our buddy Zach Lyons has deemed him. Great elite nickname, great nickname. Granddaddy strong legs Nick Folk had 3 complete field goals today. Continues his streak to, I don't even know what the number is now, but it's a lot. And he's not missed a lot of kicks in a long time. We bad job on our part. We should find that number, dig that back up. We'll update that on our Tuesday show. But 3 made kicks today. At one point in the game, he had, I did the math in the first half. The Titans had scored 72 points offensively up until that point on the year. Nick Folk had 36 of them. The rest of the Titans team had 36 of them, which is kickers doing some heavy lifting there. Well worth that 7th-round pick, I suppose. The other guy, DeAndre Hopkins, had a vintage D-Hop game today. Was so fantastic. In fact, he was really the only guy on this team as a receiver that was fantastic. But he had 8 receptions on 11 targets for 140 yards, 17.5 yards per catch with a long of 36. Big boy day for D-Hop. Not really a big boy day for anybody else. But before we talk about the individuals,
real quick on Folk, I got it right here.
What's up?
He's 13 for 13 from field goals on the year, which would put him at a 21 straight field goal streak without a miss on field goals. And then he is 7 for 7 from extra points. So 20 for 20 on the year. We're getting very close to the Ryan Suckup territory of 2015. So if he has another good game in London, which I don't know what the juju with that comes with, we'll have to see. But if he does have another performance like he's had in the past couple of games, he will break that streak this upcoming week, which I think was either 23 or 24 for Ryan Suckup in a row, both field goals and point after attempts. So
thank you. So yeah, the kicker doing fantastic work. The rest of the team offensively not doing fantastic work in terms of getting in the end zone. They moved the ball fine today. I felt like they just are the red zone efficiency. I think they went 1 for 4 in the red zone or 1 for 5, whatever it was. Not good. Just once getting into the end zone for 7 points. But in the last 22 games, this is a number that our buddy Paul Kaharski pulled up, and I found him tweeting about this. In the last 22 games, the Titans have averaged 17.5 points per game, which is not a very good number. In 10 of those games, they've scored 16 or fewer points, and they have lost all 10 of those games. They scored 7, 16, 10, 14, 14, 13, 16, 15, 3, and 16. And then in those 10 games of 16 or fewer points, again, lost all 10 of them. It's not enough. It's not good. You have to be again. I think the Titans moved the ball well enough to win today. They did not convert in the red zone well enough to win today, and that was really the difference. Some individuals here that we can kind of talk about, like I mentioned, DeAndre Hopkins had a fantastic day receiving, but the rest of the team, from in the wide receiver position alone, JT, who else recorded a catch? You have a recollection of this? Who else do you remember catching the ball today?
I know NWI had a catch today.
He did.
I know Trayvon
Wesco 9 yards. No, just receivers though.
Sorry, Trayvon Wesco doesn't count.
No.
Tight ends don't count. Okay,
not right now.
Okay. I know NWI had a catch.
Nope, 1 for 9 yards.
I don't think Kyle Phillips had a catch.
He did not. 1 target, no catches.
Out of my memory, I want to say Chris Moore did not have a catch.
Not a single one. Nope.
And
Traylon Burks was not there.
He's not there. I don't think.
So there's the trick question.
I don't think Colton Dowell had a catch. I don't think any of these other guys had catches.
No, NWI 1 catch for 9 yards was the only wide receiver production through the air besides DeAndre Hopkins 8 catches for 140 yards. That was it. That's going to be a narrative that's talked about a lot this week, and there's some validity to that. Let me push back on it a little bit. I'm pushing back on a narrative before it begins, but I see it. It's so obvious it's coming from a mile away. I don't really hate the way that this team distributed the ball through the air today. It was a big Tajay day. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 35 yards.
Had a great day.
Yep. Had a very good day. Tajay's another winner today. Yeah. Tajay looks electric. He's a ton of fun. He's a very good player. A question that I asked, by the way, I don't know. Who was I talking to? Somebody I was talking to on the Titans beat. It may have been Teron Davenport. It may have been Terry McCormick, whoever it was. I was asking somebody on Friday when we were at the Titans facility, how many players on this Titans starting offense are better than Tajay Spears? Like, are you sure are better football players than Tajay?
Can I give my own guess real quick?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you. Yeah, okay, like cool. who else is
outside of Tajay Spears, anybody else on this
11
team?
Starters, or if you think a backup is better than him, I suppose. Sure.
I'm gonna say at their own position.
Just in like I'm
gonna say 2.
Okay, so what? DeAndre Hopkins and who?
I'm going to say hot take. Like once he gets going, Peter Skronsky, I think is a better left tackle at his position than Tyjae Spears is a running back.
Okay. But that's the point, right? Is that there's really only one guy right now who can say for sure is a better football player than
I shouldn't discount Derrick Henry.
Right. But for sure, like DeAndre Hopkins is for sure a better football player than Tyjae Spears right now.
Yes.
And then you get into like maybe Derrick, you could argue is, but they both seem really good right now.
Yes.
Maybe Peter Skronsky is that kind of, end of list. Like that's the list right now. Tyjae is falling. You should get the ball into his hands a lot because he's a weapon on this team. He's an absolute weapon. So again, Tyjae, 4 receptions for 35 yards on 5 targets. A big Chig day, 9 targets for 5 catches and 33 yards. Now, to be fair and nuanced on Chig, and we are in fact a Chig Okonkwo show, we have to point out his hands are becoming a problem. He has one big drop at least a game, and you can't have that if you're going to be a receiving element as a tight end. If you're going to be relied upon to be that yak monster, to be an efficient chain mover, like you can't have these focus drops that you're having. And it feels like each game almost there, he has to have one bad focus drop before he kind of settles in, gets his mind right. You can't, you got to figure out how to get past that because you can't have that each game. Some big drops in a couple of games in a row now. You had 3 Derrick Henry receptions for 19 yards. You had that big Trayvon Wesco play, one reception for 21 yards. So D-Hop with 8 receptions, Tyjae with 4, Chig with 5, Derrick with 3, and then Wesco, NWI, and Josh Wiley all with 1. The receiver name alone, like that's what I'm pushing back on here, is people are going to say the Titans receivers besides D-Hop all stink. Without Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips, as an element of the offense, today Kyle Phillips being kind of invisible out there in his first game back, not all that shocking. Treylon Burks obviously not on the field. Yeah, you've got NWI and Chris Moore and dudes you don't like, Colton Dowell, and like we can name them, but people you don't really rely upon.
Coming full circle, kind of in the span of a week, where it's I said this to you. People are going to get mad that the wide receiver production is not happening when you have NWI as your wide receiver 2 and Chris Moore as your wide receiver 3, right? Like that is not what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, the 2 and 3 that you're supposed to have on paper are either not available or not up to speed yet. So like that, yes, it's not a problem. It's not a good thing. It is a problem. You have other weapons on this team that aren't receivers in name. They can do the receiving thing. They do the receiving of the football. Tyjae Spears, Chig Okonkwo, Derrick Henry. Like those guys exist. They can catch the ball and they're impactful when they do. So
both of them had more targets today combined than anybody else on the team. So it was DeAndre Hopkins and then Tyjae Spears and Chig and then the rest of them. So it was very clear that like outside of DeAndre Hopkins, the goal was trying to get the ball to Tyjae and Chig. Yeah,
that was the game plan. And again, that could have absolutely easily worked. And there was execution elsewhere that was an issue. One last thing that I want to talk about that I have written down before we can talk amongst the folks in the comments and answer some questions that I see. The last element that I mentioned at the top where this team has to be better is in the trenches. They got punked in the trenches. I was remembering a tweet that I sent on October 1st that I went back and found today. I said in week 3, the Titans lost in the trenches on both sides of the ball and they got crushed by the Cleveland Browns. In week 4, they won in the trenches on both sides of the ball, punked the Bengals. They did the crushing, right? They won that game by a significant margin. Some things in football never change, is what I said. Well, today, week 5, the Titans got punked in the trenches again, and they lost again to a team that they probably should have beaten. So when you are getting beat up defensively and you're letting Zach Moss run for 190 some odd yards on you, and then offensively in the run game, you're not really getting a push against a Colts defensive front, which is a good one, but was down a couple of key bodies and it didn't seem to matter all that much. And then in the pass protection game, you're not really keeping Ryan Tannehill clean enough on key downs in key moments to make key plays. You're going to lose football games. That's how football works. Some things never change. You have to not get, if you are net losing in the trenches on both sides of the ball, you are net losing the game 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. That is just how this works. So can't get beat in the trenches like that. Cannot get beat in general on defense like that, just across the board. And on offense, you have to be more efficient in the red area when you're trying to get 7 and not 3. Okay. That's all I have in particular that I want to talk about today. Before we get to the news with JT, do we have a couple of questions or comments in the comment section that we want to address?
We do. We have a couple of questions here. First, from Kenneth. He asks, question for Easton. Are the Titans elite anywhere besides kicking field goals / punting? Pass rush is inconsistent. Same with the run game. Can't even say run defense anymore after 2 questionable games back to back here for the run game.
Okay,
Your
so
response.
my response is that if your sample size is 1 game, no. And if your argument is consistently elite, then arguably no, right? Like this team is not an elite squad in general right now. They have games like against the Bengals where they seem pretty elite, and then it's bookended by games where they really fall short. So if you're trying to put an elite label on anything, you're right that it's kind of kicking field goals and punting right now. They show flashes of being very good in the pass rush, very good. And they were up until 10 seconds ago elite against the run defense. They've had a couple of bad games in a row. Again, today they're missing, in my opinion, the most important defender in terms of stopping the run that is on this team, Tier Tart, who's a fantastic run stuffing nose tackle. You don't have him out there. It's a big deal. I think a lot of Titans fans can remember back a couple of seasons ago when the Colts had DeForest Buckner and they had, I don't know if it was Grover Stewart or no, it was when they still had Danico Autry. So it was Danico Autry on the Colts in his last year as a Colt with DeForest Buckner. I believe it was in Nashville. Regardless, it was a Titans game where they were missing both of those guys. And Titans fans and Colts fans going into the game talking about how, like, that's probably going to matter for the run game. You got Prime Henry, and you're missing those 2 guys on the defensive front. And then Derrick Henry ran for 200 plus yards and like 2 or 3 touchdowns, and it was the Derrick Henry show all day. That's how it works. Like, missing a key guy like that up front can make a load of difference. Now, you got to be able to pick up the slack. Guys like Kyle Pecco and Danico Autry sliding inside, and Jaleel Johnson, who was elevated today. Like, those guys have to Naquan Jones. They have to be able to fill in and pull their weight. And today they absolutely did not. Jeffrey Simmons banged up, was not able to pull his weight. And the edges, I mean, they did a decent job of keeping the rat in the cage with a mobile Anthony Richardson to start the game. And then they didn't really get after Gardner Minshew in the second half the way that they needed to in order to impact the game. And so I think that it's totally fair to question their effectiveness right now. It's totally fair to question the consistency of this team across the board. So that's the answer to that question.
And then we can kind of answer these 2 with one answer here. But Logan says, so why did the Colts pay Taylor again?
Good question.
Moss is on a tear this year.
It's a crazy take for them to have, like, what are they doing?
Combined with how much money did Tier Tart make today? Because I think that the absence, regardless if Jonathan Taylor was fully healthy for the first 4 weeks today or not, Tier Tart today, missing him was a huge impact on the running game.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. And missing him, like, I don't know how much money he made for himself today. I actually, somebody asked me about Tart, how much money he's going to make this past week before this game. I was going to, my answer was like 8 to 11 million. I think a good contract, a good agent, can get you a contract for in that double digit range of 10 or 11 million. After this game, I think maybe it's more in line with the like 10 to 12 million, 10 to 13 million. Like, if he's that important to a Titans run defense or a prospective future team's defense, then yeah, you're going to want to pay him good money, and he deserves that money. Again, if he's not dealing with injury issues the rest of the year. So that's a big deal. Paying Jonathan Taylor looks hilariously bad today. We're going to talk about that contract, I think, in the news, but you pay him a significant sum of money. The running back holdout apparently worked. It seems really soft. It seems really dumb, especially when you've got a perfectly serviceable, cheap and free and available Zach Moss on your team who's running for 190 some odd yards against a Titans run defense. Like, that should be all you need. But instead you decided to pay Jonathan Taylor 10 seconds ago. And then today, barely use him as he's getting back. And, his counterpart, his backup on paper, absolutely murders a really good run defense. That's not great. And it makes you think they're going to have a real 2-headed backfield right now. But for one guy where they're paying him, they're newly paying him a lot of money. It seems really silly. You are muted, by the way.
One more here
There
before
we
we get into the news here, kind of a two-parter here. Kenneth says, not sure what it will take, if anything, for Vrabel/Rand to be a seller at the trade deadline. It's time to punt, but Vrabel won't do it. Sigh. And then Kenneth says also, I plan to push for a rebuild as hard as Easton pushes for Skoronski to be a left tackle. Some other comments here and there about maybe trying to tank at currently 2-3.
You're 2-3.
Your
Guys, you gotta
thoughts
pump.
on
You've got to pump the brakes, right? Again, the perspective of if they get through this opening stretch 3-3, you said all August, all July, all June, all May. If they can get through those first 6 games 3-3, then we're good to go. We're balling. Let's get to the back half stretch of the season. What happened to that? A lot of you also said even if you're 2-4. Not a big deal. New offense, a lot of new personnel, starting to figure it out. It's the hardest stretch of the season. Maybe you stumble, like whatever. Just survive the first 6 games, get to the back half of the season, and see if you can go on a run, go on a tear. You've got some nice, serviceable is the wrong word. I'm trying to avoid saying easy because nothing's easy in the NFL.
No.
More it's conducive for success.
Schedule.
Softer. That's a great, yes, thank you. They have a softer schedule after the bye. Yes. They can just get it. So you are guaranteed to be no worse than 2-4. Now, how you get to 2-4? There's a lot of ways to get to 2-4. You can lose to the rate 33-30 in overtime in a barn burner where the offense looks good, the defense looks good, and Lamar Jackson just does Lamar Jackson things, and you lose. You're going to feel differently about that over a 2-week break than if you go to the London game and the Ravens hang 27 points to your 3. Like, that's a big deal and a big difference. So how they look is important, but gotta pump the brakes. Gotta pump the brakes on. If listen, I understand a lot of people are of the mind that unless you think that you are a serious Super Bowl contender, that every single year you should tank. And I understand there's validity to that. That's a philosophical conversation we can have forever and ever and ever. Ultimately, I think the beauty of the NFL is that you don't quite know what you have in a team in September or in October. You are finding things out as you go, and teams it's all about getting hot at the right time. Does this team have much fewer ways to win than some of the best teams in the league? Yeah, they totally do. And does a run of any kind in the postseason for them at this point right now seem unlikely? Sure, it totally does. And those things aside, we have had more instances in the past that I can count where in week 5, you could say those same things about a team, and then they end up going on a run that's maybe not to the Super Bowl, maybe not to the AFC or NFC championship, but it's exciting, and they win a bunch of games on the stretch, and they knock off a big team in the playoffs, and it's electric, and that's the beauty of football. So I refuse to put a hard, they're not going to win the Super Bowl today. I'm not saying that because I wouldn't say that about any team, really. It seems really unlikely they're going to. That's the most, only sits speak in absolutes, right, JT? Only sits deal in absolutes, and I refuse to lean into that dark side. So just pump the brakes. Let's see what they can do in London in an exciting week against a good opponent.
Yeah, and then one more comment here before we move on here. Logan says, "Do you think we see Fulton trading for another guy?" I don't. Who's underperforming? I don't think that's how trades work in the NFL. No, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Hilarious. I'm so glad you brought this up, Logan. You can't. What are people doing talking to trade Christian Fulton, brother? You've got to have a trade partner to make a trade. Who are you trading him to? Who? It's like these people that play on Madden where it's against computers and you can trade anybody and anything for any for reasonable compensation in return. These other teams have eyes. Their managers, they're not in the charity business. What are we thinking Christian Fulton's going to yield in a potential trade? Nothing. Nobody wants this guy. He's no good. He's a problem. It's not like a JC Jackson situation. JC Jackson he went back to daddy. He went back up north to Bill Belichick. He was the prodigal son who left. He left New England. He went out to Devil's Country, California, had a bad time, and then he comes crawling back to daddy, and daddy says, "I'm going to try to fix you." That's what that is, okay?
And didn't do a very good job today.
And he did, by the way, in his first game, did not do great. The Patriots are one of the few teams that had a worse day today than the Titans did, and by a significant amount in the score sheet. So yeah, that's not a Christian Fulton situation. Christian Fulton's a Tennessee Titan guy. That's who picked him. That's who wanted him. And that's the bed they have to lay in right now. So let's just stop talking about trades for Christian Fulton. It's not happening. Stop it.
Yeah, that we can move on now to the Titans news, because I'm sure we're going to talk about so many things this week before we do. Probably the biggest news is that myself and you are headed to London this week, so that we can kind of, I don't think we talked about that. I know we mentioned it
Not a
haphazardly on the show on Thursday, but
well, we've not mentioned what it means for the schedule, and what it means. Tuesday show as regular will be live on Tuesday afternoon for our Wednesday drop, and then the Thursday show won't be live from BoomBozz this week because we'll be traveling. We'll have a Thursday show. When it is and if it's live is TBD. We'll know more about that on the Tuesday show, so tune in then to know.
When we get to London.
And then, yeah, when we're in London, we'll do our show after the Titans game that morning. I think we're probably going to do it between the early slate and the afternoon slate instead of between the afternoon slate and Sunday Night Football. So we'll doing it around 3:30, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll have all the Titans discussion from London live, and then you and I will move forward from there. We won't schedule too far out. So that's the plan, and it's going to be a ton of fun, and maybe we'll have some London content of sorts on social media or on YouTube of us being stupid.
As Pretty Boy says, do a show over tea and crumpets.
We just might have
say it's Tuesday, and
what
things like that.
Yeah, stupid things that British people hate that Americans say. Right, 100%. All right, let's get to the news with producer JT. JT, what do we got?
Yeah, let's start with the AFC South roundup for today. And the London Jaguars defeated the Buffalo Bills today 25-20, only after the Bills kind of lost every single good player on defense today.
The whole defense died. Yeah.
The only thing I would come out of this game is, and I kind of tweeted this early this morning when I was watching this Bills game, if I'm a Titans fan, am I happier with a outcome of no Titans get hurt this week on this turf that apparently took so many Buffalo Bills lives today, instead of getting a win against this Baltimore Ravens team? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know, but it's something to consider.
Well, and the craziest part is I've not fact checked this, but I'm believing it to be true because I want it to be true, and I think that it is true, but I do want it to be true. Apparently, there's perfectly good grass they maintain really nice there in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the Hotspurs that play soccer there. And the NFL is like, when we play, let's just slap some turf on top of it. I don't know what the logistics are there. I don't know what's gone into that decision. Hilarious and dumb. Shame on the NFL. Shame forever and always in perpetuity. We should consistently be shaming them for being cheap with their product and ruining their valuable assets and their players because they can't play well when they're broken and the turf breaks them. So.
Yeah, we'll have to see this week. It is a problem.
It is a problem.
And then we can move on here to the Houston Texans, who lose to the Falcons 21-19 in the most mediocre barn burner that I've ever seen in my entire life today. CJ Stroud once again looks pretty good. 20 of 35 for 249 yards and a touchdown. Didn't look crazy this week, but also didn't do anything that effectively hurt the team today, but just kind of was two teams that are middling teams in the NFL right now. Yep. But they still look impressive today, even though Desmond Ridder looked above average.
I kind of thought this was the worst Texans performance that I've really paid attention to so far. I'm kind of excluding week one for the Ravens, first week against a hard opponent in a hard situation with a rookie QB. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, this felt like their worst game. They weren't bad. Stroud wasn't bad, but they could not capitalize in the red zone like the Titans couldn't, and ultimately it cost them as well.
And then we can move on here to, of course, as you alluded, the Jonathan Taylor contract. As someone pointed out, why would they pay him? Well, they did decide to pay him this week before he was activated for this game. A 3-year, $42 million contract extension that includes $26.5 million guaranteed. A lot for a guy who only ran the ball 5 or 6 times today. When he was out there, didn't look like that much of a factor, although I don't think that was on his part. I think it was because he had 2 practices under his belt in the entire season. Obviously, he's not the player that Cooper Kupp was, so I don't think he was going to have that kind of impact. Same thing that you saw from like a Jameson Williams, who comes back this week and didn't have that much of an impact. But as the season goes on, like you said, they just paid this guy. They don't want to burn him out super heavily to start the season. So maybe they just kind of do a 2-headed monster backfield.
Yeah. I mean, that's where they kind of have to be right now. I don't see how you can sit down Zach Moss when he is putting up the numbers that he's putting up right now. You got to ride the hot hand, even though you paid a different hand. So it's funny.
Moving on here, just something that you pointed out, an underrated narrative is just how competitive this AFC South has turned out to be early on in the season. Everybody hovering around 500 and every team a viable competitor each week. As you pointed out, it may be a knockdown, drag-out four-way battle for the division crown. And we can also look at the standings right now as the Colts are 3-2 with a 2-1 AFC South record. The Jaguars in second at 3-2 with a 1-1 AFC record. The Texans 2-3 and the Titans in last place with 2-3 and an 0-1 AFC record. So still anybody's ball game.
Yep, it's a tight division. It feels like it's going to be a 4-horse race, at least for the foreseeable future, and that makes for a disgusting, ugly, entertaining stretch of football for us. So that should be a fun time.
With
every team seems rather flawed right now, and every team seems capable of winning right now.
Time.
Plenty of fun to be had. Yes, I don't want to do this, but we do have to get to the best bet Gauntlet recap. JT,
we do. We will end off the show
tough day.
On an interesting note because it was a tough day, and I think we both went into it just feeling like this is going to be such a square day after
we talked about it on
picks.
Thursday. It felt like it. Yeah, last week was a big. Listen, I mean, yeah, I'll own it. 1-4 day for me. I felt like I stand by the process on a lot of those picks. Ultimately, the right side is the winning side, and had some bad bounces. None of those really a blowout. All came close, and all were frustrating losses. It's going to happen. You as a bettor, you have to be prepared to ride the ride. And you have to be prepared to have some downs with your ups, and that's what's happening. JT, you're 2-1 on the day so far, pending Sunday Night Football, which is currently going on, and then Monday Night Football.
Yep.
Hopefully, you can get a couple wins there to eke out a saving grace for the show on the week. But listen, the show is still, no matter what happens, we're going to be well above 500.
We can afford this. We can afford this.
We've built. Yes, this is how betting works, right? The public, the squares, they're going to get theirs. They get theirs 40%
of the time.
That's how it works. That's how it works. They're going to get theirs. The only key is to get yours more than they get theirs, to paraphrase a famous sports quote of times gone by. So we're going to have that. We're going to continue. It's all about our record at the end of the year. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Not really worried about it right now. You're going to have some bad weeks. You just got to bounce back. That's what we're going to do. Already on to week 6. Can't wait. All right. That is producer JT with the news, and that is our show today. Appreciate everybody tuning in with us live on this Sunday evening. Hope you enjoy Sunday Night Football as we say goodbye for now. Check out the podcast version of this show up tomorrow on wherever you get your podcast episodes. If you didn't catch the whole thing, check it all out. Shrike says that dang cabal failed us. They did, in fact. Listen,
your Illuminati Pentaveret betting group.
That Illuminati Pentaveret is now 3-1 on the season as I've been tracking them. So, again, even the pros aren't going to win them all. All right, that is it for us today. Make sure you're subscribed on social media and on YouTube. Subscribe to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. It costs you nothing, and we're trying to get that subscription number up. So real quick, just open your YouTube app, hit subscribe. I will consider it a personal favor. Thank you very much. It will make me very happy. Then make sure you're following us on social media at Hot Read Pod. At Hot Read Pod is the handle on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram. You want to check out all of those because we have great content going up on there pretty much every day throughout the football season. All right, until Tuesday afternoon for our Wednesday episode, we'll be recording live on Tuesday afternoon. What we're going to be discussing, I do not know. Maybe some tape, maybe a guest, maybe both. We will see. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great rest of your Sunday and a great start to your week. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.